94.4 in Nairobi. We're in Malindi 97.7, Nyeri 90.9, 96.7 in Eldoret, Nakuru 96.0, 102.5 Kisumu, 87.9 in Mombasa. We also live stream the show every morning on Spice FM KE, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, as well as www.spicefm.co.ke. Now we're joined by a guest on the hot seat. And on the hot seat this morning is Dr. Kibet Shikuku. He's a lecturer at the University of Nairobi for Hematology and Blood Transmission Unit. We want to discuss this crisis in Kenya's blood banks. Dr. good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
You look healthy.
Pretty.
You look bloody good.
Thank you.
Eric, please remind him that he's sitting on the hot seat.
It's pretty hot.
Yeah, you're already feeling it.
If it gets too hot, then I'll
We
need
have an
something
AC.
to cool it.
Don't worry, we have temperature control here.
We have temperature control. You'll be sorted.
No problem.
Dr. we are seeing a lot of issues. I mean, since last year, the issue of blood transfusion, blood banks, people going to hospitals and not having access to blood, people being told that, you need to call in your relatives to come and donate blood. All these things have been happening pretty fast. Excuses upon excuses. Funding from PEPFAR has stopped. Government has not put in funding. We are waiting for funding now from the World Bank, which has expressed interest in funding us, in helping us. Lack of capacity, for the National Blood Transfusion Services. This is a lot of back and forth. What's happening?
Well, I'll attempt to respond to that question as much as I can. But I think it is important for me, first of all, to start by saying, as a country, in regard to health, we've been heavily reliant on donors. If you look at funding in the Ministry of Health, over 80% of our funding actually is supported by donors. And this is replicated literally everywhere. The US government certainly being the largest donor. And this, of course, has been heavily supported through the HIV program. And the reason why the US government has been supporting the blood services is because of safety. So remember, for you to get blood, blood has to be tested. Someone has to ensure that the blood is safe for use. So a lot of investments have gone into safety. But there are various components in regard to blood management. I keep saying blood is not just a drug. It's also a weapon. People have used blood or blood products as weapons. So it has to be handled appropriately and safely by the government. So blood for me is a government function. And in that regard, the government should actually be spending resources to support blood programs in the country. I work at Kenyatta National Hospital, one of the largest facilities that consumes huge amounts of blood. And I keep saying, unless we manage blood properly, really, it's as good as us wasting ourselves. And so if you look at aspects and processes around blood, there's a lot that goes into blood management. Remember, when it comes to blood, you look for healthy donors. You must get a donor who is in a position to give you blood. And jokingly speaking, it's within a certain age bracket. If you are less than 16 years, it's unlikely that you'll donate. Again, the moment you start hitting your 60s, unfortunately, you may not be the best donor. So we are looking at a cohort that is relatively smaller than what we would have expected. But having said that, the ideal is to at least budget for 2% of donors in our population. So if Kenya has about 50 million people, we should be looking for about 1 million units every year. Is that what we've been getting as a country?
No.
The answer is no. We are way below. We are less than 200,000. I think the best we've ever had.
I can tell you is 164,000.
Yes.
That's the best we've ever had.
Yeah.
You can do your mathematics from there. This year, I think we got less than 100,000. So is this where we are, how we want to manage our healthcare? I guess the answer is no. And, the back and forth will keep on while Kenyans are, suffering. So without really getting into unnecessary discussions, I think for us, we need to bite the bullet, face the reality, and get a solution to the problems that we have.
And the solution is direct funding. This thing of saying, let's expect somebody else to come and fund us. is a bit too much?
I mean, really.
Like you're saying, it's like entrusting our national security. Like you said, it's as important as national security, entrusting the national security to external funding.
Was there a time when matters relating to blood was actually funded by the government, and was it successful then?
Well, I don't recall. I know the government chips in.
It is a government project, really.
Yeah.
What I'm saying was there a time when
It was 100% funded.
just government, just a localized affair?
I guess prior to this HIV epidemic, the government must have been in charge.
The government was in charge. Did
Yeah.
we ever hear of the problems we're talking about now?
Apparently, possibly things again were a little different from what we are seeing today, with the reasons that if you look at disease trends, so much is happening to the extent that now blood is becoming a global issue.
It's very central to a lot of things.
That's right. So even if you looked at the services and the way we manage blood in this country right now, we still have some deficits here and there, but I keep saying the bare minimum you can do to a unit is to make it safe for the recipient.
Yeah.
That is the bare minimum you can do. You can do a lot more, because if you look at our services, vis-a-vis what others are doing elsewhere. About 2 weeks ago, I was in Mauritius, and if you look at the level of testing to make their blood even much more safer, is a lot different from what we are doing, and that has a cost implication on it. The least you can spend on blood right now is about 6,000 Kenya shillings
Per unit?
per unit. That's the least. I mean, that is just to try and make sure
It's called a bare minimum.
the bare minimums are taken care of. Is someone footing that bill? I guess indirectly the government has been footing that bill. That's why we are made to imagine that blood is free. In reality, there is a cost that goes into it. If we wanted to escalate the safety a little bit,
From optimum level.
well, slightly closer to that, then we may be spending about 15,000 per unit. If we want to make it extremely safe and get to global standards, we should be thinking of between 20 and 25,000.
So when we talk about the availability of blood, then so we are talking then after it has been treated, as it were. So now we're talking about the separation between plasma and red blood cells and hemo and all of this. So by the time it has been dealt with is when we say this is what we have available. As opposed to I go in and they take a pint of my blood and then I say, well, I've
It's
donated
available.
blood, it's available. So we're saying after the process is when we say this is what is available?
Yes, so basically before you donate blood, there's a questionnaire that you're taken through. You must satisfy that criteria before someone actually can get blood out of you. But assuming your blood is taken, it must be screened for at least 4 things: HIV, hepatitis B, C, and syphilis, at a bare minimum. We call those TTIs. Once your blood is free of these infections, then the blood is processed. And the process, involves now separating this blood, into what we call blood components. Because blood to us is like junk. You have so much in it that you would want to separate them into components that may be useful for different diseases.
Okay.
But the most critical that we all are familiar with are the red blood cells. Blood, of course, 99% of blood is the red cell. The rest is, platelets and white blood cells. And then all this is pulled under a fluid called plasma. So you need to separate this, into those components so that you remove the fluid part of blood, which is plasma. That is kept. That can actually benefit different categories of diseases. And then you have the red cell that is critical. That is the one that you need to move oxygen.
It's the life.
Yes, that is where your life lies. So basically, once you've separated this blood into these components, you can store them. The best you can do for the red cells is to store at possibly 30 to 35 days. That's the much it can stay. Beyond
After
that,
a month,
it's useless.
It's useless.
Okay? So even if we were to debate, issues of blood was sold, blood was not sold, I mean, how much was sold? 9,000. What do we need as a country? 1 million units. So where are the others?
Yeah.
Really, even if we were to get into a debate. Secondly, I'll tell you this. If we started the debate of blood being sold, this is the question I would easily throw to all of us. What is the criteria of us distributing blood? Remember, blood is freely given. how do we distribute it? If as a government we decided that, whatever little blood we've gotten will be given to the public sector, what about the private sector? So there's quite a bit that goes into blood utility, to the extent that if we say there are donors in the northeastern part of this country, do they have relatives in Somalia?
They do.
Would they want that these relatives benefit from blood drawn from the Kenyans?
Naturally.
If your blood was given to an American today, and they got excited that we got blood from Kenya that has saved a life, regardless of the method that that may have been used to release this blood, would someone be happy that this blood has saved a life?
Of course.
As we are discussing today, if you look at the papers, some are saying 9,000 units are being spoiled. What is better? 9,000 to save lives in Somalia vis-a-vis 9,000 getting
spoiled here.
I mean, really. So I know Kenyans would get discouraged when we hear people selling blood. But I think the most important thing for me is that we have Kenyans out there. We have our KDF soldiers in Somalia. Do we know that? I mean, I know investigations may be going on, but do we really know how this blood got into Somalia?
Right.
I'm not trying to defend anyone.
I'm actually asking, did that blood actually even get to
Somalia in the first place?
That's the question.
Yes.
So really, I think without us getting into a lot of details, for me, the only appeal I have for every Kenyan is let's figure out how we can save life by donating.
Okay, but also at the same time, let's talk about when we donate, that blood actually gets to
What
be
happens?
used. It's not going, I don't want my blood to be among the 9,000 that's going to waste.
That's true.
City Muga, what's today's proverb?
Today's proverb is that rain beats the leopard skin, but it does not wash away the spots.
Did you get that, Daktari?
Yep.
Rain beats the leopard skin, but it doesn't wash away the spots. Welcome to the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. If you're just joining us in the studio this morning, we're joined by Dr. Kibet Shikuku. He's a hematologist. He's a lecturer of hematology and blood transmission at the University of Nairobi. He also works at the Kenyatta National Hospital, the largest referral hospital in the region. Well, the one that uses the most blood, I can imagine, that requires the most blood. So we're talking about the crisis, the blood crisis in Kenya. Many things emerging. The story, of course, that was covered in today's Standard is about blood going to waste. We have heard what the CS for Health was reacting to yesterday, allegations that Kenya's blood is being sold by unscrupulous people through Somalia to other parts of the world. Now, these are big scandals, City.
Well, these are big assertions. And unfortunately, coming from the ministry, the proverb for today actually comes in very handy, because the rain here, the words we keep hurling and we keep directing towards the Ministry of Health. But the likelihood of the ministry changing is, should we say, in my opinion, next to nil. We can say all we like, they're not going to change their spots. Hospitals, government hospitals, public hospitals have services that people pay for. That money is used to ensure that services are made better. Some of that money probably could be, I don't know. The issue of blood and how to ensure it is safe is something that could be a normal part of the process that any hospital has. Because hospitals actually do generate money. Now, how they go about using the money, whether it goes to the exchequer, comes back, I don't know that whole story. But what I know is this: hospitals are not entirely helpless. When you find that private hospitals actually have their own blood banks, there's a debate around it, but that's not what we're going to get into. It means they are able to afford not only ensuring that they have blood, but also ensuring that this blood is safe. So
yes.
What I'm saying
So you're saying it's the same, even public
I'm saying
hospitals
with
should have the
government
same capacity.
involvement, the hospitals already have money. If the government needs to ensure that it provides the
Government
service
already
that it
has
does,
money where? CT. We already know
hospitals
it is
have
not-
money.
But it has not been budget item.
Eric.
If the budget item is not on supporting
Eric,
blood,
Eric,
this
there's-
money is not going to blood. It's going to pay staff. It's going to other things.
Okay. Dr. Shikuku here works for Kenyatta National Hospital.
Yes.
It's a parastatal,
Yes.
is it not? Okay. The money that it generates, where does it go to? Anecdotally speaking, I'm not going to ask you about details. Do they have the leeway to use that money to ensure that services in the hospital is actually provided?
So I may not be in the best position to
No. I want you
give
to
the
say
details,
what
but
you know. Yes.
yeah. So I think the issue is that money is actually paid through the ministry to support services in the public sector. And the question is, has blood been costed in that budget?
Yes.
Is the government paying for blood services? I think the answer is yes, to some extent, quite indirectly, but no to a larger extent. And the reason why I'm saying that is because through UHC, one of the things we are trying to push is for hospitals to charge for blood services. And the reason why I'm saying this is because if you see the government's contribution towards blood management, it's pretty minimal. Minimal in this sense. Remember, we said 80% of the funding comes from the donors. We have a smaller percentage that comes from the government. If you look at the services provided right now through the National Blood Transfusion Service, okay, because that service is entitled to make sure we get adequate and safe blood. Adequacy, of course, is now an issue. Safety is becoming a problem because there is no testing that is taking place.
Yep.
Now, I want to make a comment in relation to safety this early. While we know that the private sector is attempting to close a gap, we have safety challenges. Because the level of testing that is required is a little more complicated than the one that is being practiced right now. To the extent that blood testing should be centralized. While I know we may have decentralized through regional blood transfusion centers, remember I did indicate that blood is not just a drug, but it can be used as a weapon. So someone has to be in control of that process.
Yeah.
Secondly, you want to make sure that that blood has achieved the highest standard of safety. The person who is charged with the safety is the government through the National Blood Transfusion Service. So the service has been empowered with appropriate equipment to test for this blood. Majority of the private sector is attempting to close that gap. Whether it is meeting the standard is something that is questionable. Having said that, then,
is the NBTS, though, responsible for ensuring that those standards are met?
And that is the point. Remember, NBTS can only do that. It can only quality assure that process if it is facilitated. How can you?
If you don't have money, how would you go and ensure?
And these are the challenges that we should be talking about. These guys cannot even move.
Well, I think would I be right in saying that it has not been made a priority because historically it has always been, it has always been somebody's responsibility. It has been donor funded. So
how long has donor funding in HIV been? How long has it been in the country? 20 years?
Yeah, that 20 years is enough to change
enough
habits.
to change somebody's habit or make them comfortable.
Change, City. You deal with this on a daily basis.
Yeah, to make people comfortable to know that.
I actually agree with you.
Yeah.
I actually agree with you. There's a point I'm trying to make here. Funders will give you notices. Every year, when there's that COP, they tell you this arrangement that you have with them. They tell you. They don't only tell you what to do with their money, they also tell you when it is they're going to change. In detail. By the way, in detail. At this point, we will do this. At this point, we will do this. Every donor will give you money for the needs that you claim you have, and they have their own interests. But these needs also change. And when they change, they tell you. It's up to you to negotiate. It's up to you to understand. It's up to you to fit in.
To prepare as well.
Yes. But the one thing that they do, they help with the understanding that the government that's being helped will take over these services at some point. The help is never indefinite. It never is. So the discussion here is when we knew that it was coming to an end, what did we do? Because we knew. We had been told.
There's something that Dr. Shikuku is saying here, and I think even the last time we had this conversation, I was trying to get into that, but I wasn't bringing it out as well as Dr. Shikuku said. I like what you've said. Blood is a national security issue. It can be weaponized. When we say
has been weaponized.
When we say that we leave blood to be, go to the qualms and wishes of donors, and this is wrong. Blood should not even be coming up under FEPFA, a World Bank, whatever Mr. Kagawe is telling us. This should be directly coming from our money. Now, I hear you saying that you propose that in the rollout of the universal health coverage, we, the patients, should be paying for blood. I say no. I've paid my taxes.
Actually, what we are advocating for is that the National Health Insurance Fund should pay for blood.
The same
Wait,
fund.
wait.
Sorry, Dr. Shikuku.
Yeah.
I have to stop you here before you
Watch
even
out,
go further.
NHIF. Just say ministry.
NHIF. Can we just talk about in terms of
NHIF,
order and things that need to be done? Can we not bring the fund into all of this because it not at this point. It does some things that are not palatable at this point for me.
I hear you, and I agree with you. So what should actually be happening is that health should be freely given. That's what we should be working towards.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that, so this is a challenge. So let's look at the problem first so that, the funding issue can be discussed separately. If you look at the way the ministry has prioritized and targeted blood donations, a lot of times the targets have been pegged on the resources that are released. Okay, so let me explain. We know that we should be collecting 1 million units per year.
Yeah.
But how many units have we been collecting? 168. What is the basis for the 168? Someone created a target of about 200 units. And that was pegged on the amount of money that was released by the government. Is that appropriate? Certainly
Of course not.
Those are under targets. And that is where the problem is. We are not actually looking at the needs on the ground. Instead, we recreate our own targets that are way below what is expected. We've even moved away from those under targets. And now we are even struggling to
meet that target.
To move around. We can't move. Look at the kind of logistics that the government has put into blood drives. Vehicles are all grounded. There are no drivers.
Not driver. No, what do you mean not driver?
Sorry, I don't understand.
Are drivers paid on casual basis? Are they not permanent employees?
They are supposed to be permanent employees. But where are the drivers? Where are the vehicles?
Is there money?
Now that is the question. Where is the money? Who is actually supposed to be facilitating this process? Even if we got blood from Northeastern today, how will it get to Nairobi? If we needed to mobilize it, how do we move blood from here to Turkana? How?
You're going far. How do you move blood from here to Machakos?
Exactly.
It is far. How do you move blood from where we are to Kenyatta National Hospital?
Oh, yes.
You see, even if you did a drive today, who should be moving this blood from here to NBTS? It should be a function of the government.
Of the government. And when it gets to NBTS, what should happen and who should be funding that?
Again,
Same.
it's the same government.
So we're talking about even 15 bob. Is it 15,000 shillings per unit? Just optimally required for that processing of the blood.
Yeah.
If that money is not there, that blood goes into the blood bank and it waits 30 days, gone.
I mean, that's the end.
So it's dumped
it's
after
wasted.
that?
Yeah,
Not
you throw
used?
it away. You'll not be able to use it. But if it was, if it was appropriately processed, the testing is done, separated into components, then you can store, because each of those components have different storage, durations. Plasma, for example, can be stored for more than a year. You deep freeze it. But then if the freezers are down, I mean, so
Sorry.
If forget freezers,
Freezers.
forget the freezers. If the electricity hasn't been paid for,
You are sunk.
I'm saying this because if you consider the sub-counties and some of the units within, sometimes you likely have a health facility without power because power wasn't paid for. It's not really complicated.
yep.
And it does happen. And
Oh,
we
it
see
happens more often than you know.
And we see it all the time.
Yes. And when you're told what the bill is, it's a colossal sum.
That's right.
So I want us to come back and also discuss the KNBTS itself, the Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service. It's a body that was created and mandated with taking charge of blood transfusion, blood transmission. Now, what role has it played in terms of, yes, there's no funding, but in terms of communication with the government, with the parent ministry? We can be saying, oh, the government has not funded, the government has not done this and the other. What has KNBTS done? In the meantime, what has it done? Has it presented its papers? Has it presented its case to the ministry? Have we seen the leadership of KNBTS coming out to say, this is the problem we are facing? This is why we are facing these kind of challenges that we have. This is the situation. On Kenya's biggest conversation, Dr. Kibet Shikuku, lecturer, hematology and blood transmission at the University of Nairobi. He also works at the Kenyatta National Hospital. He's here. We're discussing the blood crisis in the country. Yesterday, the story was done by a KTN medical journalist, Dr. Mercy Kauriri, who's now joining us on the line. Good morning, Dr.
Good morning, Latif, and everyone.
Everyone greets you too.
Well,
Doctor.
there's this particular everyone also greets you, yes.
There's the other everyone called
morning.
Dr.
How
Shikuku.
is everyone?
Good.
Okay. Yes.
Now, Mercy, you've heard what we've been discussing with Dr. Shikuku. We are talking about the crisis of blood in this country. You went
Yes.
to KNH. You saw what's happening there. Just give us paint for us a picture of what's happening.
Okay. And I'm glad that you have Dr. Shikuku there because he's my senior and he's very well versed to this. And what we saw is blood in various stages of expiring. Blood has a certain shelf life, 35 days for whole blood. And what we saw pints and pints of blood that are in storage because they haven't been screened, they haven't been processed. So some have expired, some are in the process of expiry. Remember, the blood is collected on almost every other day. Mm-hmm. So the expiry days are different and they are varied. So the information that we gathered is that we have 9,000 units, not just here, but across the country. And we were able to see blood bags in other blood banks across the country that are just expiring. So the issue, from what we found out, is that it is not a lack of blood, but a lack of screening of blood, which renders the blood that has been collected useless because you cannot transfuse blood that you don't know its safety status. You don't know whether it has HIV or not. You don't know whether it has hepatitis B and C or not. You don't know whether it has syphilis. So you cannot give that blood to anyone. And so that's the situation we got on the ground. I know the discussion has been that blood is being sold in Somalia or illegally elsewhere. We were not able to we did not find any evidence that there's blood that has been illegally shipped elsewhere because now we looked at the logs of all the blood that has been collected and where it has been dispatched to per hospital in Nairobi, for the Nairobi region. So we did not see any blood that could not be accounted for. That does not obviously say blood is not being sold, so that's up to the DCI to tell us. But what we saw was that we have blood that we cannot use, so it's just going to waste.
Now, Dr. Mercy, you've heard what Dr. Shikuku is saying, that now the government says it has come up with measures, for example, bought reagents. Now the next thing is, and I think, Dr. You may need to get off the speakerphone and just put us on next to your ear. We sound better that way.
Okay.
So we're talking about what the government is now doing. What measures are these that the government ought to take? And having spoken to all these people who are players in this sector, do you feel the confidence that this can be addressed quickly?
Okay, I know. Yesterday there was a stakeholders meeting on the same. So on that regard, I have confidence that something is being done because the people who are put together are the players in that particular blood sector. So that one. So what the government needs to do is, one, look into the short-term measure as a matter of emergency. So that means supply reagents for the machines that have been working, that the staff are trained to operate and that know everything about it as a stopgap measure. On the immediate term is now put in place all these things, not even just put in place, because the IT infrastructure that the CS was talking about is there. So it just needs to be activated, make sure it works so that in the immediate term now we are able to now start tracking whatever blood that we get in terms of the units that we've gotten, what have we done with these units, where has it gone, and all that, and do the part of hemovigilance where if there's anything wrong with a blood unit, if anyone reacts to any blood unit, we are able to track that. So have that system in place. In the long term, we need to be reliant on ourselves in managing blood. We don't need to start to go back to donor funding. I know the World Bank is coming in probably on a short term or immediate term to help the government in this phase, but we cannot always be relying on donor funding for some of these crucial issues. And I'm glad the Cabinet Secretary is cognizant to that. We need to put in funds, allocate adequate funds. And the last time when we did this story, the Director General for Health was saying that for us to be able to do 1 million pints of blood, we need about 1.5 billion shillings per year. for us to,
Only?
just in the blood unit, yes, for us to be able to manage our blood. That is money that can be allocated and for the government and the Ministry of Health to make sure that it is used for that particular purpose. Because it costs about 15,000 to process 1 unit of blood. So if you're going to do 1 million, it's about 1.5 billion shillings, which I think as a country really, that's money that
We can afford.
are able to afford and put into blood services. I remember these blood services are not just for storage. There are mothers who are in labor, postpartum hemorrhage, and hemorrhage is one of the leading causes of maternal deaths. There are mothers who need that blood. People are on cancer treatment. 33,000 Kenyans lose their lives every year to cancer. They need blood. We have children, we have sickle cell, we have malaria, we have all of these things that are in need of blood. So really, it is the lives of Kenyans here at the end of the day that we are talking about. And really 1.5 billion shillings from taxpayers' money is something that we can afford.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mercy Korir, for joining us. Asante sana. We'll wish you a good day. Asante sana, good day.
Yes.
Dr. Ari, I mean, she has basically said what you've been saying, but also, put it in that in a journalistic perspective as well.
Yeah.
1.5 billion shillings. BBI rallies so far,
Waste of time and resources.
they have taken more than 1 billion shillings. I'm sure if we just did a simple calculation, assume 200 million shillings per rally per weekend.
Actually, why don't we just focus on the 81 billion shillings that was reported as having not been spent by government corporations, which means that money is not in the recurrent expenditure, isn't it? Divert it.
It's possible to finance this.
There is money. Why is it that there's always money for something that is political?
And this thing of saying, World Bank, why do we need?
Actually,
World
Eric, you've got to the heart of the matter, and you brought this matter up. It's like an addiction. Until some donor issue comes up. Okay, we are told now we have access to 2 billion for locusts. All right? Let's see what will happen. World Bank had even come in on the locust issue, but now the issue of blood, they're saying there's $1.4 million. You do the maths, it's a good amount of money. Now, again, why must the government always appear to be playing and waiting this waiting game until some donor appears to give us money? Why? And remember, this movement that eventually took us to the level where we're supposed to be a medium income country. Personally, you know my thoughts on that particular subject. I will not repeat it. But you have a situation where we can't access monies that would have been assisting us because this particular position that we are supposed to be in was told to us, and we believed it. And it's registered that we are. And yet, we are actually a poor country. And the bulk of our citizenry are terribly poor.
Yeah, that's very true. I just want to make some clarities based on what Dr. Ari did mention. So the visit to KNH should not be tagged with the challenges that we've been seeing through the national service. So KNH is not part of the National Blood Transfusion Service. KNH is a consumer. So we need to delink the two. Okay, so the challenges that we are facing, KNH should not be brought into the picture. KNH is just a recipient of a product
that comes from
that is developed, generated by the National Blood Transfusion Service. We are a consumer.
Okay.
So I think that is important.
Where is the blood bank domiciled?
It is actually in the KNH campus, but it is a completely
So that's where
separate
KNH comes
entity.
in. Basically,
Yes.
it's that complex. That houses KNBTS and the blood bank,
Yeah.
but not the hospital and its
Not
operations.
the hospital, and I think it is important we distinguish those two.
Clear.
So I think what Dr. Ari has actually mentioned is very important. And I want to agree that, we need to look at the immediate, solutions to the problems that we have. And I think the government is trying to resolve those problems. Initially, we were a little worried, and I was actually worried that we might be moving from crisis 1 to crisis 2. I was a little worried. And the reason why I was worried was because reagents for about 67,000 tests had been procured for an equipment that has not been tested in this country. And we had left out reagents for equipments that the staff are able to utilize. I think that was corrected. And I was happy that now, at least we're not transitioning to crisis number 2.
Mafia house.
So that is the lack that we have. But having said that, we still have a lot of logistical issues to address. Because as we've rightfully mentioned, blood still has to be moved from the donor to the testing facility, have it processed and distributed. That is an issue that is supposed to be addressed by a software called BEX. So BEX is, it's a system that manages blood donations in general. And the government has actually invested in this system for it to manage blood services in the country. It is a very good software that has been tried in other countries. I think it was developed by the Germans. Tried. We also have local solutions for the same. We are developing apps that can assist us reach donors, manage donors, educate donors, and these are the things that have been lacking. But having said that, what is not being done is that this particular software has not been deployed to the level of the transfusing facility.
Okay. I'm going to assume that this is not the first time that you've expressed this, right? I mean, It's not today that you talked about it for the first time.
Yeah.
And these issues and concerns would have been raised to the relevant authority, isn't it? You would have said to someone at some point that we have a problem here, here, and here. Were they not available for this meeting, or have they not been able to read the memos that have come through, or what have they received this? Have they received this information that you're telling us now?
I mean, so this is not good news to the government.
Yeah.
I mean, they are aware, and apparently, so
they're the ones that procured
the system,
this platform,
and it is supposed to
when
be
they
paid
make
for.
the decision that we need this platform, we need, and where are we going to deploy it? It's there on paper.
Yeah.
Now let's go ahead and procure. It's procured. It's brought. Has it been taken to those places? No. Come on.
It's not fully deployed.
Let's throw a little mud into this situation. Let's muddy the waters a little more.
Just a little bit more. We're already at non-visibility
Where,
status.
if we were to process blood in this country, where do we process it?
It should be at the National Blood Transfusion
But where do we
Service.
actually process it? Which units within the country? Because we know where the units are.
Yeah, so basically there are 6 regional blood
Yes,
transfusion
we do.
centers. There are 27 satellite centers.
Okay.
I'll try to explain what the satellites do. So basically, the National Blood Transfusion Service has the headquarters where policies and all those things are developed. And then the regional blood transfusion centers manage the donors, manage the units in terms of processing, ensures it's safe for use, stores it, and distributes. The satellites, on the other hand, are domiciled within the counties. So we have about 27 of those. And the satellites also do donor mobilization. They go and look for donors, get the blood, but they don't test. That, the function of testing
is
at the regional. So a sample of blood is sent to the regional blood transfusion center for testing. Once it is confirmed that the unit is safe for use, the satellite is told to use that unit. I remember last year it traveled to Bungoma, during some of my visits to the counties. And I found blood just sitting in a fridge. Patients were in need of the blood.
Yeah.
But it had taken too long to get the results for the testing.
From the regional center.
From the regional blood transfusion center. Logistical issues. These are governance issues that should be addressed.
Yeah.
So there has been some level of laxity in terms of governance that needed to be addressed. And believe you me,
at this point in time,
yeah.
How many of these renal centers actually function?
So as we are discussing right now, only one is functional.
1 out of 7.
Wow.
And the reason is, and actually I think that is Eldoret, the rest of the centers are down.
Because?
Down means what?
Because?
Down means they have not been facilitated with the reagents to test. And that's why I did mention that the first thing the government has now tried to do is to procure the reagents for these centers.
Okay, so these individuals up until now, these centers, are they manned by individuals?
Yes, there are
There's,
people
there's
there.
a head of a center.
So there's the head. There are people who are sitting there basically twiddling their thumbs, waiting for something to happen.
People are waiting.
And earning money, salary every month?
Certainly, yes.
Wow,
Si
okay.
kazi yangu. Unajua haijatoka kwa ministry.
Okay.
So I think these are the
Tumeambia
challenges.
ministry watutumie reagent.
So till then we wait.
It's a way Germany state.
And then the ministry says, unajua hii kitu imeenda treasury. Sasa tunangojea treasury.
Treasury, tumeongea na KEMSA.
It's for real, this is not a matter that even the CS should be saying, "Oh, we are now procuring." Say yes, we are procuring, but at the same time, take administrative action.
Yeah.
And it's important that the DCI moves in, and it is not even a matter for DCI to move. It's there.
Yeah.
You did not do. In fact, what the PS should be doing is saying who is in charge, who's in charge, who's in charge, who's in charge, who's in charge. Here, DPP, do the next thing.
Actually, arrest those people first of all. Let them assist in the investigation, and then let them explain.
All of them
You know, these reagents aren't
Kamata
being
Friday like this.
Friday is good. These reagents are not being invented now. These processes and services are not being processed now. People know what is demanded. They even know where to get them.
That thing that we call Mafia House, because Mafia House has been called Mafia House for some of these reasons. We even had a former PS in the Ministry of Health here, Professor James Olekiapi. He told us how Mafia House operates. People go there to make money. You've just given us an example. We have equipment that has been used and people have been trained.
Functions.
Somebody there decides, you know what, there's a new one. We need to procure this and sell
So
to the
do away
government.
with this one.
They go and they procure, they sell to the government, and they decide to procure reagents for that particular unit.
For which people are not trained.
People are not.
How
they-
useful
it's
is
not
this?
gonna work.
This against a backdrop of certain
Why are we
so-called
here? Why are we not I feel like I should march there. Honestly, well,
Eric, consider, don't rupture blood vessel. Consider for a single second. I know we have a doctor in our
An
midst
aneurysm
here.
is about to happen.
Yes,
here.
but take a sip of water as we advise our guests. I'm not advising you, Eric. Take a sip of warm water.
But they honestly am.
No, it is, but
I am,
consider.
honestly.
Okay, take your pick with the ministry. What do you want to get pissed off? Take your pick. We remember those mobile units that where the Madare?
Oh, the mobile units. Yes.
Yes,
The clinics.
Yes,
The
rotting
clinic.
quietly. Okay. You can take your pick. What about drugs that were ordered that are in hospital that have expired? This list is long.
As per where you would get annoyed.
This list is long. So that's what I'm telling you. Take a sip as you consider which one you actually want to get upset over first. Then you can move in that ascending order or descending order. Yes.
You have somebody who's trained, right? In these matters, you're somebody who works in a referral hospital. In this
Someone
matter.
is paid.
Somebody. No. I'm talking about like somebody like now, Dr. Shikuku. Okay, but Dr. Shikuku, when he tells us, I'm a blood specialist, we look at him and blame him.
No, what can
But
he do?
actually,
You guys,
it's not
you
his
doctors,
fault.
what
All of
can
it,
he
yeah.
do?
You're
What
killing
can
us.
he really do?
What can he do? What can he do?
And you tell us Kenyan voters are wise. We are stupid.
Oh,
Okay.
you're going back to the
This
Kenyan
is where we
voter.
were.
Yeah,
This is where we were
stupid.
going with this in the first
I
place.
think, Eric, at this point in time, I think you become a leopard.
Possibly I should say
Yes.
that the Kenyan voters are good people. Kenyans have given us blood, if we were to look at it from that perspective.
Kenyan blood donors are good people.
Yeah. And,
Kenyan
and
voters, different ball game.
possibly we
Same
are
people. or you think that when you actually register as a voter, you stop becoming a blood
No.
donor?
No. Different mindsets.
No.
At that point,
You know, Eric, we're bringing two conversations here, and let me put it this way.
my Kenyan neighbors
You
are
do
good.
have a perspective.
My Kenyan voter neighbors are not good.
do we have looking at this because
You
you
know,
want
Eric
to,
is a Kenyan voter who doesn't donate blood.
you want
So-
to look at this then with some kind of glimmer of hope or some positivity because
Yeah.
we can't be like
Completely,
like this
yeah,
forever. I'm
that's right.
sorry. It cannot be that we continue to be in this situation over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Is there hope? I mean, is there something that can be done and be followed through? Because
I
really,
think-
it's a dire
think
circumstances.
there
Before
is
you
hope.
answer that,
Yeah.
Dr. Terry, there's
Yeah.
a caller who's calling in from Naivasha. This is Michael. Michael, good morning.
Morning. How are you, Dr. Terry?
Good. And you?
I'm good. I'm just been listening to your conversation,
Yes.
and I think it's rather frustrating as a donor because Dr. Terry said they had a stakeholders meeting yesterday.
Yes.
So I'll just ask which stakeholders. Did you call somebody like Kennedy Sanya, one of the leading donors in Kenya? Ask
No.
him what he's been doing, what he's not been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we having a relapse of people donating?
Mm-hmm.
Because, if you hear stories of blood being sold, whether it's true or not,
Mm-hmm.
as a donor, you're wondering, I did it freely.
That's
I
right.
walked in as a volunteer donor.
That's right.
Yeah. Personally, I do it 4 times a year. But
Thank
at some
you.
point, I was like, really? Do I want to do this?
That's right.
Because you hear there's a function to reward people, then you realize you're not even there. Some of the donors are not there.
Yeah.
So you're wondering, which names are these that they're saying they're leading donors?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But probably what I would suggest for you as a panelist,
Mm-hmm.
to look for a documentary that says what happens when an NGO admits failure.
That's right.
You see, it speaks tons about us as Kenyans, as Africans. We
That's
rely on
right.
donors, which is good. But what happens is the NGO admits failure.
Thank you very much, Michael. Dr. will respond to that question as we take the next one. This is Oscar calling in from Gong. 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. That's the number to call and have a conversation with Dr. Kibet Shikuku. So let's take this second caller. This is Oscar in Gong. Good morning, Oscar.
Morning. How are you guys?
Fine, thanks, Oscar.
Morning,
How are you
Oscar.
doing?
Poa Dijo mambo.
Fiti.
Now, daktari habari ya asubuhi.
Salama sana labda yako.
Nashukuru.
Asante.
Now, I really waited for this call to go through. And the reason is because I've really been touched by what you guys are discussing today. As a beneficiary of a blood donation, I want to tell you, when you're really looking for blood for your patient, I've never been transfused myself, but at least I know of a patient who, a friend. It's a very dire a situation. But then I'm also perturbed by the explanation that Daktari has given. And it all boils down to having moved back relaxed because there was donor. When you mentioned that the blood can be used as a weapon, I think you are failing to unpack that statement. In my view, money has been coming from PEFA.
That's right.
The government of Kenya has failed to realize the kind of person that they are dealing with in that very office that mandates that money to come here from PEFA. That guy is a business person. And when he looks back at the history of Kenya and the way Kenya has been dealing with donor money, it's basically at one point it was going to stop. Why we relaxed and thought that this was just a child's play, I don't know. But the other angle of it is, we have pulled trade from these guys and sent them to another people. Yet we still expect them to come and support us through their taxpayers' money in the things that we ought to be doing for ourselves. It is high time the government owns up this particular thing. It doesn't matter how many projects the government puts through, but if Kenyans cannot access affordable medical care, and that's why I totally agree with Latif, that there is no money that a Kenyan should pay for blood, regardless whether through NHIF or whichever other source. This should be a government-owned project, and they should own it solely. Not wait for World Bank, not to wait for PEPFAR.
Anybody. Thank you very much, Oscar. Let Dr. respond to these ones.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Thank you for the questions. Possibly, so let me start by saying that the stakeholders that were called by the CS yesterday were, purely technical fellows to come and sit together, look at the issues at hand, try to get solutions, and possibly advise the government on what to do. So that is basically the team that was meeting yesterday. Having said that, and I want to thank the caller from Naivasha, because he's been a regular donor. Those are the kind of people that we are looking for, and thank you so much for doing that, because that is what we all expect, that people can become regular donors, not just single donors or one-off donors. The second thing is that if you look at our services and again the heavy reliance on donors, it's quite sad that the government actually never transitioned appropriately. But the beauty is that the current cabinet secretary does admit, and I think that is the beginning of healing, the admission that there was a problem in transition. The second thing is that we also agreed yesterday that let's call a spade a spade. And I think that was a call by the CS himself. And we called spades spades. We didn't mince our words. And we agreed that there's a problem. Who should address the problem? The government needs to step in. And I guess that is why some very basic measures have now been taken. Again, it's not true that all the measures will be addressed real time. The issue is that, as I said again, where did we drop the ball? We failed to realize that the donor and their time had elapsed. That is what and we refused to transition.
Yeah.
We actually failed to take it up and run with with the exercise. So I think that is where the problem began. And I'm hoping and trusting that the new changes with the inclusion of all stakeholders, because this was a unique meeting. No such meeting has ever been called. I was actually surprised that all of us were called, and including the critics. And we all sat down together and we agreed that this is the way to go. And I thought that was a very good move. So my hope and prayer is that we shall all support the service, try to advise the government appropriately. Because remember, I told you that what was happening previously was that people are setting targets based on resources that were being channeled to the service, which was way below what was expected. Now is the time for us to realistically plan, budget appropriately for adequate units to be processed. So that is where we should actually be headed. And I would still appeal to all Kenyans.
When called upon,
donate.
When called upon, let us struggle towards saving a life. I know challenges will be there, but let's see how we can support and help our people.
Asante sana. Dr. Kibet Shikuku, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We'll invite you again. We keep saying that we want you to come back after a couple of weeks, and let's take stock of what has happened. So changes are expected to start this morning. New units have been dispatched. Changes are expected to start this morning. Let's call you maybe in 2 weeks' time.
And see how things are going.
And monitor for us. Then you can come and tell us. So now, out of the 7, you remember one was working, now all 7 are working. Out of the 27, now blood is the test and the communication is happening much faster.
I appreciate and I want us to walk this journey together.
We will.
Thank you very much.
C.T. Muga.
Yes, the rain still beats the leopard skin, but it doesn't wash away the spots. If you consider that someone has a bad habit, the rain here would be the words that may be spoken, but the bad habits don't really change. But we are hoping that in this instance, that this particular rain does change the spots of the Ministry of Health.
Let's hope. We can only live on hope. So, your final words for the weekend?
Let the message of hope continue being part of our discussion.
There's always something that can be done. Have a good weekend, folks.
I'm annoyed at the Ministry of Health, and I think we need to take action. We need to stop talking and saying, the government has done this and the other. It doesn't matter how many BBI rallies we hold.
Yep.
If people are not held accountable for the things that they do not do. People have died for this. People ought to be taken to court and jailed. Or if we go City Muga's way, shot and not even buried.